If you're a solo entrepreneur, the dream of scaling your business is one you probably have every single day. But you probably struggle with the thought of hiring a team, hiring the people, and wondering if there is a way to do it on your own and still remain a solopreneur. Well, today I'm speaking to Jason Resnick, and he's going to answer those questions for us, and you'll be able to see what is possible with your solopreneur business. Episode 87 starts right now. Hey there, welcome to the Lora Shipman Show. We hang out here weekly to talk about things like social media, entrepreneurship, marketing, tools, strategies, tips, and it all starts right now. Hey there, before we get started with this show, I just want to share my passion with you. I love teaching people just like you how to master social media for business, breaking it down into easy to consume and easy to execute steps so that you can see immediate results. So whether you want to start a social media consultancy or grow your brand's presence on social media, I can help. I can help you get started and master all the things that you need to know. So I want you to go over to my website. It is filled with resources, tools, tips, and courses. Visit lorashipman.com. That's LORA shipman.com to get all the goods. Now, you ready for the show? I know I am. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm so excited because I have Jason Resnick here, and he's a freelancer, but he specializes as a developer in email automation. I can't wait for you to hear what we're going to talk about today because I think it is going to really help people get their mindset straight when it comes to their business. Jason, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited for this as well.
I am too, because I know you're going to have a lot of tidbits and a lot of nuggets that our audience is going to walk away with. And I like to say it's a little controversial. One of the points that we're going to talk about, I don't want to give it away yet, because I really want the audience to know first off what you do. And then we'll get to that controversial question because it really intrigues me.
Sure. Yeah. So I am, as you said, a developer. My name is Rez online. That's how people know who I am. And I'm a web developer. But I've shaped my business over the years to help established online businesses reduce the time to the first purchase for customers, as well as create repeat customers and create raving fans. And I do that through development and email automation mixed with a little bit of on-site personalization.
Okay, great. So tell us, I'm trying to think the best way to start this, because are you a solopreneur or do you have a team?
No, I am myself. It's me, myself, and I. That's the team. I can't say that I don't have a contractor where I have my own podcast. So he does all the post-production of that podcast. But outside of that, there is no other person. So I am the salesperson. I am the developer. I am the marketing team. I am the person who cleans up the desk. I am all of those things. And so, it's me, myself, and I like it that way.
And so, so you're the ultimate solopreneur who wears all of the hats. And a lot of times, well, first tell me, how long have you been a solopreneur for?
Full-time for myself for the past 9 years. And, amongst working full-time, that's, I guess for now, 16 years.
Wow. Okay. So, and so you've been able to sustain this for quite a long time. And have you been able to scale your business as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as a solo business owner, solo owned business, I can move, I can shift, I can, take on as much or as little as I need to, because the responsibility is on me and who I need to support, which is my family, and myself, obviously. But I mean, I've been able to scale my business in ways that I try to do it in a smart way, by leveraging the skills that I have as a developer. I'm not a salesman by traditional sense. I'm not going to do cold calling or knocking on doors or any of that sort of stuff. But I've been able to leverage my own skill set to do a lot of that outreach, to do some of the things that you would hire for. In and amongst how I've shaped my business too, I've essentially built out a system and process that my clients, although what I do for them is custom, how they interact with me and how they move through my business from the point at which they enter to the point at which they leave is all the same. So that has allowed me to essentially productize how I manage my clients and how I do my sales and marketing.
So I guess the controversial question is this. Do you believe that people can scale their business to a six-figure income and truly be a solopreneur and not have a staff? Because right now, the thing that I see going on in social media and everywhere is everybody says, if you want to scale, you need a team behind you, and it's got to be, so many people deep and all this stuff. And to somebody who is an entrepreneur and getting started, I think that sounds really overwhelming. And maybe people don't want a staff, but still want that income. Tell us how you feel about that.
Yeah, well, I'm the prime example of a six-figure solopreneur, right? I see a lot of the same thing that you're seeing as well, but there is this other groundswell too that you have to remember what it is that you started your business for in the first place, right? And so for me, how I started my business and what I wanted way back when I figured out that when I first realized that I didn't want to work for somebody else, it was so that I had the time freedom to spend it with my family, to see my kids' first steps and hear their first words, be around for, their school events. And I mean, they're not school age yet, but, just to be able to take a random Tuesday afternoon off because I wanted to and not have to ask permission for that. I felt as an adult, I should have that time, freedom, and flexibility to do so. And so that was my why. And so I always, anything that happens in the business, a decision, an opportunity, a project that comes up, I always reflect back on the why and make sure that aligns. And so I don't need 100 clients or 1,000 clients. I just need enough to keep me sustainable, which for the services that I provide is 8 clients. So I'm good that way. And as they cycle in and out, right? Most of my clients are on retainer, so it's month over month. But there's usually 1 or 2 that I cycle through, because I've built up my business in a way that still does the marketing and sales for me, even while I'm doing the work. I have a pipeline that I can tap into if I need another project to come through.
So what does that look like? Because I think that somebody who is sitting there listening today, I love that you were able to put a number on how many clients that you can have in order to sustain your income. But how do you get to do all the other things like the marketing of it in the funnel and all of those things? Like, what is it? What's the magic there that you can reveal?
I wish to say that it was magic. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work, but it's a lot of, and I didn't know this when I first started out. I mean, to take a step back was that in the early 2000s, I was working for a consultant firm that basically put all their eggs in to the startup.com boom that was happening. And I came in there at like employee 600 or something. And over a 2-year period, they swelled to 2,400 employees. And then by the time they let me go, because everything was collapsing in on itself, there was like 400 of us left. And so that was my first opportunity. And that was the early 2000s that I said, hey, maybe this is the time. Maybe this is when I should do it. I have the skill set. I know what I can do for people and this and that and the other. Well, instead of me going get a full-time job, I did that. And 18 months in, I had to go get another full-time job because I didn't know a lot of the sales and marketing and these sort of things that you need to know in and around business and the skill set that you have. So I went back to work for a couple of different agencies. And learned all of those things, made contacts with salespeople, learned what their processes were, learned things that I didn't like about contracts and how businesses ran. I learned a lot about understanding the customer and their pain points and their, desires of why they buy things in the first place. And so I took all of that and applied that to now in 2010 when I left and decided this was the time for me. I've now since applied all of that to my business. And so what I look at now is coming from the perspective of empathy for the client to understand where they are, what they know, what they don't know, and trying to solve a problem for them. Like, as I said at the top, I help my clients get more customers, get more repeat buys, and create raving fans, right? So people come to me because, and there's a key word in there, is I help establish online businesses, right? So I don't work with people that don't have an online presence or website right now, right? And that's because of what I do for them. They need to have traffic. They need to have an existing customer base. I segment their customer base based on what they bought, what interests there are, demographics, things of that nature, and then turn that back around into their sales and marketing. And so I understand their problem and I talk about their problem a lot, right? Not just with them, but here on the podcast, right? And even in circles, in certain groups where my ideal clients are, I answer questions, community, all that stuff. And so I'm seen as somebody that knows the answer to very specific problems. And I'm able to then get that inbound traffic rather than me reaching out to people, but that inbound traffic to say, hey, you should talk to Jason. He knows how to handle this problem. And so that's how I've built the inbound pipeline into my ecosystem, if you will. And then once they are there, then I start putting them through the process. I don't have a sales call conversation until they fill out a project brief. And that project brief gives me a window into who they are as a as a company, as a person, who the decision makers on the project are, what's the importance of this project for the business, why now, and all of these other things like budget and timeline. I ask them all these questions up front so that I can fully understand if I can help them or not. And while I may be able to help most of those people coming through, there's only a handful that I'll actually take to that next level, which would be a sales call.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. Just like going backwards a little bit, when you said you went and got a full-time job so you could learn all the things, I just want to give people a perspective of how much work that was in terms of how much time did you put in before you decided to leave that job to start your own?
Yeah, so the timeline looks like this. So it was 2003 where I struck out on my own for the first time. And then it was the November of 2004 where I went back and got a full-time job. Because I had bills to pay and rent to pay, I had to eat, those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
But then in 2010, that's when I decided that was the right time. And it was the right time because for me, I had already always did the side hustle thing. I had clients and built websites and things of that nature. But it got to a point where I was waking up, going to work at 8 a.m., coming home at 4:30, grabbing a bite to eat, start work again at 7 p.m., work all the way to 3 a.m., and then do the whole thing all over again. So
wow.
For me, it was, and I admire all the people that could just say, hey, I'm going to quit my job and figure it out and hopefully land softly. I wanted to land softly when I said I was done, right? And so that's how I was basically burning the candle at both ends. And at the start of 2010, in January, I gave myself the goal to set myself up into a space where by my birthday, which is in September, that I was going to give myself the present of quitting that job and working for myself. And I did that in August of that year. And the rest is history. I've had my own business since.
Wow, that's amazing. So like I think a lot of people see this persona online today where they say, they're making six figures right out of the gate when they start their business. And it's just not true. I mean, there takes that time. Like you really paid your dues by working so hard for that full-time job and then doing your side hustle until, what did you say, 3 a.m. in the morning?
Yeah, sometimes even later than that.
Wow. And you did that for 9 months, right? Is that about right?
Pretty close, if not more. I mean, I was like I said, in January of that year, as the annual goal setting sort of thing starts to happen,
Mhm.
I was already essentially burning the candle at both ends. And it was like, okay, how do I do this in a way? Like I have to give myself a deadline. And that's
Yeah.
why I said, like, by my birthday, you're going to do this because this isn't sustainable, right? Like you need to sleep. Right? And I was commuting an hour one way to work. So it wasn't like it was just, there were times like, I would be dozing off in the car or
Oh,
something of
wow.
that nature. So yeah, I mean, I always have to give myself a deadline and that SMART goal, if you will.
Yep.
And so that's what I did. Yeah.
So today, and I know you kind of touched on this earlier, but what does your daily schedule look like today? You're not like, are you staying until 3 o'clock in the morning to work? Like, what is that? It's so different, right?
Absolutely. It's very different. So it was even different 4 months ago. We just had our second child. So he's 3 months old 2 days ago. And so what my wife works from home as well.
Okay. Okay.
Right? She's a freelancer. And while she doesn't have, the business per se that I do, what I do is I wake up usually around 5 or 6 in the morning. I try to get out ahead of the kids waking up.
Mm-hmm.
They wake up anywhere between 7 and 8. But I get up, do some work. I work until 11 o'clock, then I stop and I have lunch with my older son, who's 2.5. Play with the kids for a couple hours, give my wife a break. She does her work or she does whatever she needs to do. And then usually like 1:30, I go back to work. And I work until 4 or 5 on Fridays. We're recording this on Friday.
Right.
This is it, right, for me. And so, I usually end my days around 1:30 or 2 on Fridays. Because I wanted to spend time with my family. I didn't want 12 bosses or anything of that nature. I don't want to work until, 3 a.m. And while what I do in the tech world, there's time zone differences and all this and that and the other, and there may be launches and things of that nature, but it's seen out in advance. It's not something I'm doing on a daily basis. And it's something that I do talk about both with my clients as well as my wife. I say, look, I have a client, I have a project, and I'm going to be working late, until 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. And that's an off chance. That's I've set those boundaries with my clients to say, look, we're no launching on Fridays, or we don't launch on Mondays. I'm setting the parameters around which I work, because that's the thing that I struggled with, especially early on, was giving every minute of every single day to my clients.
Mm-hmm.
That's not that's not sustainable. I got burned out that way. And it was something that I almost forced me to go back to work full time. Because I was just completely burnt out. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm doing something wrong, and maybe this isn't for me and all this. But having that structure, it's essentially the same as every other business out there. I can't go to Best Buy at 2 o'clock in the morning and think that their door is open so I could go buy a TV. It's not going to happen. Right?
Right.
And so same thing with like lawyers and doctors and everybody else. Everybody else has these parameters. So I wanted those parameters. I encourage anybody that I talk with. I have coaching clients and other developers who I help, in communities and free communities. I encourage them. Don't give your entire day out to them. Tell them that you work during these hours, and I'll get back to you tomorrow if it's off hours. So, that's the only way you could structure your clients. And for me, that's so important because, again, it aligns with my why. Right? That break during the day was something that I strived to reach before we had our second son. But it wasn't until, again, like the hard stop where Lucas came, was born, My wife was like, okay, I know we've been trying to get that split schedule, but I need to work sometimes. I need to get a break and things of that nature. So we need to have that conversation. And we had that conversation, and every single day I had that split day. I basically work in the morning, work in the afternoon, and around lunchtime is her time to do what she needs to do, and I spend time with the kids.
That's really good. And I think so many people, I know I struggled with boundaries when I first started out on my own. And because you wanted your business to really take off, and you didn't want to disappoint your clients, and you wanted to get the good reputation going. So I totally get that. One other thing that I really loved that you said is you really understand your customer, and you know exactly who you want to work with and who you don't want to work with. And I think so many people want to work with everybody just because they want to get that cash flow in. And if we take a look at what you did, it's really focused on who you're working with. And so now you can get those higher paying clients because of that. I think if you agree to work with anybody and everybody, you dilute yourself and you dilute your income.
Absolutely. And it when you say yes, and this is some, obviously cliche that a lot of people say, is when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else, right? And so if you want to be respected, you want your clients to value the work in which you do, you have to value your time. You have to value the work that you do. If you are available 24/7 and they're willing to pay for that, great. But don't do it for $15 an hour, right? You have to value what you do, and something. And I it sounds like I have everything figured out, right? And which I don't, right?
Uh-huh.
Even to today, this week, even, right? So I bypassed my sales pipeline at least a couple of steps, right, with a lead, and the only reason why is because I do consultation calls, right? Mm-hmm. And so my consultation calls are paid for. And so I understood a little bit. We spent some time on the phone, and I understood what their problems in their business were, what they needed, right? So that project brief, a lot of those boxes were ticked, if you will, right? So I was like, okay, I'll bypass that. Like, I don't want to, because at the end of the call, they said, how can we work together? So I said, well, let's just finish this up and then we'll address that. And so what I noticed was, even down the line, I always am upfront about my pricing. Mm-hmm. That's another controversial topic that people are always iffy of. But I'm straightforward. I don't want to waste time. I don't want to beat around the bush, if you will. I want to be on the same page as somebody. So I will say it's going to cost X dollars. And I will say that multiple times, either in emails or on calls, way before the proposal is even written, because the proposal takes some time. Obviously, the calls take some time, and this and that and the other. So I did that with this lead, and they said all the right things. This sounds great. This is expected, understood, all of the right things they were saying, yet parts of their business still didn't tick those boxes for me. They were new. They had an online presence, but all they had was a website. They didn't have any traffic. They didn't have an email list. They didn't have some of these things that I look for in clients. And so we went through the whole sales process, went through the proposal stage, and it came out the other end that said, this is just too much of an investment for us at this time for our business. Which I was like, what? Why did we go through all of this? I told you how many times. And so, but for me, I noticed, and reflecting back on it, that's my fault. I didn't put them through the process. I didn't trust the process that I had set up for myself. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that as we went through the process, I always bring up that project brief. So even if there's a couple of red flags, they're still front and center in black and white for me. But because I just had conversations with them, it was in the back of my head. There was no concrete thing. And while I referenced it back and forth, I even said to my wife at one point, during the process, I said, they're not an ideal client, but they're saying all the right things. Mm-hmm. And then when it fell through, I said to my wife, I said, yeah, I didn't get that one. She goes, well, you did say that they weren't your ideal client.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So, while it sounds like I have all this stuff together, we still bypass things and we still shortcut things. And it's like I always try to say, especially to my coaching clients, like, look, you got to forgive yourself sometimes. Reflect back on what happened, make always a waste of time, but then just try to improve and iterate.
So I have a question about the project brief or the client brief that you're doing. How detailed is it? Like, how many pages is it? How granular do you get?
Well, for first, it's online, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the big point for me, because most of our dealings are going to be through email, video chat. So I want that. I want to know at least you're capable of interacting online. If they want to pick up a phone and talk, yeah, that's not going to happen. Like, I don't want them to call me on random Wednesday afternoon and distract me for whatever I'm doing. Right.
Right.
So first thing is online, but it's as detailed as it needs to be. Right. And for me, it's asking the questions that I need to move that conversation forward.
Okay.
So it's broken down, and I have it, and this is 9 years in the making, right? So
Right.
I've iterated over this to ask certain questions as those questions became important, but it changes based on some of the answers. So if they say, well, I deal with ConvertKit and Drip, specifically, right? So the rest of the platforms, Infusionsoft, Entreport, all of those other ones, I don't deal with. So when I ask the question, who is your email service provider?
Mm-hmm.
And they choose one of the other ones, then I immediately pop up a question saying, are you looking to migrate to ConvertKit and or Drip?
Mm-hmm.
And if they check no, well, that's a disqualifier, right? Because I'm not going to work with them, even though I might be able to help them just fine. But my process and everything else, they could tick every single other box, and still I'm not going to work with them. So the project brief allows me to filter out and essentially disqualify a lead from working.
And I love that is so specific, that whole email provider thing, because I think a lot of people would be like, okay, so they use, I don't know, MailChimp, but that's not something that you'll work with. And so just that one little thing totally disqualifies them. I don't think a lot of people have the confidence to disqualify a client over something that might seem operationally simple. And they just, that's my take on it. Like, I think a lot of people would say, oh yeah, I'll take you anyway, even though it's not my most favorite thing to work with.
Because the thing is right. So I am intimately aware of all of the nuances of Drip and ConvertKit, right? And so I know how long things take to set up, to send. I know all the little nuances of the application, of like timing, of the best practices in which they want things to be implemented on that platform. So I know all of these things. And if I go ahead and, while MailChimp is a fantastic application, I don't know all of those things over there.
Right.
I don't know the timing of, when they send emails or how they send emails. They send them in batch. They send them all at once. I don't know all of that stuff. And so while I can learn that thing, I'm just not going to spend the time, because I've built the structure of my company and the pricing that I provide, that I put on the solution that I provide to the clients. All of that's built in. So if it takes me an hour to do it in ConvertKit, I don't know that it's going to take me an hour in MailChimp.
Exactly. So I love that you stay right within your genius zone, and you're very focused on that, and that you don't waver from it. I think that's so important. I know a couple of weeks ago, you and I were talking. Me, myself, and I over there, the collective team. We were talking about how you get your business and how you network online. And I was fascinated about how you made your breakthrough and how you got really well known in the space. Can you take our audience through what that looked like?
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, I got burned out initially when I first started. And I was trying to figure out why, and I figured out that what I was doing was everything for everybody, and there was no way in which to stand out. And while word of mouth was great for me, I had built in systems, more like processes, not systems. I look at them two differently. Process is just something that you follow, the steps that you follow, and a system is an automated thing.
Okay.
And so for me, the process of prompting for word of mouth referrals for my existing clients and past clients was working, but it was sending me more bad leads. And because I was doing everything for everybody, and I was it was almost a race to the bottom, right? Because I was being compared on price a lot of times. And so I was getting very, very burned out. So when I had that pivotal moment where I said to my then fiance that I was going back to work full time, and she basically turned around and gave me the kick in the butt to say, but that's not what you want. And I know that. So you definitely know that. And which shocked me because she's definitely the planner. She wants the stability and she wants to know all of those things. For me, I was like, okay, if she's supporting me, then I got to figure this out. Right. And so what I did was that's when I unpacked my ideal client, who I was serving, why I was serving, what was important to them, what did they need, right? And so I settled in on the WordPress market, specifically WooCommerce.
Okay.
While that was pure luck, because that was before Automatic, the foundation that supports WordPress, decided to, purchase WooCommerce. For me, it made sense because the types of clients that I wanted, they wanted to be able to manage their own thing. So what I wound up doing at that point in time was, in order to kind of plant my flag in the ground, was to then hitch my wagon to those people. One, it was follow the WordPress, follow WooCommerce. I was specifically dealing with Prosperous, which was the company that built the subscriptions plugin for WordPress, and really just understand them, make connections with them, help their customers in a way where they may not. And I do that. I say that because a lot of their customers wanted custom work, but because they were building products, they're not going to build custom projects for folks.
Right.
But they may refer the work off to those that do. And so I did that, and that created some word of mouth for me. But also it was podcasting. That was the biggest win at that point. I didn't know it at the time, but I had a loosely scheduled podcast with a bunch of other developers, and all we did was just talk geek talk. And for me, it allowed us to meet each other, and it was a roundtable discussion. We'd just pick a topic of discussion in the development world, and so be it, right? They started to see me. Oh, Jason works with WooCommerce, specifically subscriptions. Okay, if I hear anything, I'll refer Jason, right? And so that word of mouth, just planting my flag and saying this is what I do and who I help and why I help them, allowed all of these moments of referability back to me. And I'm not just a developer anymore. I'm not a web developer. I am someone who does this for a certain kind of client so that they can achieve their goals, right? And so that's what creating that focus around the business of why I do what I do for my clients makes it easily referable, because now I don't get those leads that come off the back of a weekend barbecue saying, hey, Jason can make you a website. Right? Sure, I could. Do I want to? No. Right. But now in and amongst the people that I do help, those clients and past clients, they know what I do for them. And so I create memorable moments through working for me, with me, right? And then I create prompts in which they can refer me work through that experience. So you have to create these points in time for your word of mouth referrals. And while it's a long game, if I was to ask most developers, most service-based businesses, most designers, most agencies even, where do you get most of your clients? They're going to say word of mouth. One of the questions I love to ask is, what's your biggest marketing tactic? And then they say, well, word of mouth. I said, oh, okay. So what are you doing for that? And they say, well, we're not doing anything. It just happens, by chance. I said, well, then that's not a marketing strategy, right? Because marketing strategies have some sort of result, right? Meaning you do something and you get some result. And so what I try to do is, in the way in which I work with clients, both purposefully and not so, I come from a genuine way of giving, but I try to create an experience, these micro experiences that plant memorable moments in their mind to make me referable down the road.
So didn't you tell me at one point, and maybe I've got this mixed up, something like you were on Twitter or somewhere and you were like problem solving for some of these major software companies? Tell us about that a little bit and how to get involved in that, like for your own business.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, like I'm not a traditional salesman, and I don't plan to ever be. But I tried to figure out how I could jump into the mix of conversations, right? So my social media platform of choice is Twitter. And that's just like a big cocktail party for me. That's how I look at it, right? Like there's conversations going on, and there's business conversations, personal conversations, political, whatever, right? There's a whole bunch of conversations happening. And so what I wanted to do is not spend my entire day on there waiting for the conversation to happen, but know that when that conversation was happening, where I could inject myself and help in some sort of way with a link, with a answer to a question, whatever it could be, I wanted to be notified, and I want to be first, right? Because the early bird catches the worm, right?
That's right.
So I built out basically this monitoring service, you will. I call it my sales bot, that looks on Twitter. I also built it out for Craigslist and some other platforms as well. But on Twitter, that looks at certain keywords that are mentioned using the advanced Twitter search. You can basically build up a URL, and you can swap in and out the parameters, if you will, right? And so brand mentions I would look at, people, right? So like owners of software companies that I worked with, what are they talking about and who are they talking to? So what happened is once one of those conversations hit, my sales bot would then ping me at the time on my phone. Now I have it in Slack. Okay. And essentially I would just get notified that this conversation was happening, and I could either do something about it right now or later on in the day when I had more time or something. But that allowed me to be first. And, I didn't know it when I set it up, but it was just, for me, it was like, I'm leveraging my skill sets as a developer to go ahead and build out a central engagement tool that alerted me when there was an opportunity for me to help and serve that community. And as a result, I talked specifically about Drip earlier. When I started branching out into the email marketing area about 4 or 5 years ago, Drip had a great API, and they were a growing company at the time. This is way before Lead Pages even bought them, but they were small, and their support team was burdened with support requests. And what happened was people would take their complaints to Twitter, right? Again, it's a cocktail party, right? Yeah. So, hey, I'm having this problem. Support's too slow, blah, 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 blah. So I would just set up a search for Drip being mentioned with a question mark, because usually a question mark meant there was a question being asked. And I would jump in way before Drip even did. And what Drip noticed, because they would come back eventually, usually within a day. Hey, looks like Jason's got you handled. And I would just refer, to help documents, a link that I found online. I was working in Drip all day long, so I had the knowledge of the platform, even though that I wasn't being paid by them, but I was helping. And what that allowed me to do was get a whole lot of clients that were Drip customers. And then Drip recognized my name, and they, basically they would refer me work. Right. And
okay, wait, just stop right there, because that just is like amazing, and it's brilliant. So if you guys aren't catching this, I just want to reiterate what Jason's saying here. He is basically becoming a brand ambassador for Drip on Twitter without Drip even knowing about it, really. You're solving customer queries or help desk kind of questions, but you're redirecting these people who have asked the question back into the Drip community, I guess to say, by sending them to the help page of Drip and giving them, stuff like, and giving them real concrete answers. And then by the time Drip got there, their work was already done by you, and you weren't getting paid for it. But fast forward, they would start to just refer. Well, first off, the Drip customers would figure out that you knew what you were doing. And so then they would just contact you offline to do some sort of consulting or whatever.
Right. Whether it was consulting or implementation of some project that they had.
That is amazing. And so then, Drip pretty much endorsed you for your skill set. And it was like a win-win. You made them look good, and in return, they made you look good. And it was because you came from a pure area of helping.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, similarly it was funny. I had found ConvertKit literally a week later than Drip. and for me, Drip has since moved away from my ideal client, but ConvertKit serves them well. And so I've since switched with ConvertKit. And they're a small team. I've spoken with Nathan Barry on several occasions. I met him, when he came for a meeting here in New York, so jumping, same thing. Like it was the same process over and over again. I would just take that search, look for ConvertKit people that were having a problem. I would get pinged. I'd jump into the conversation and say, here, this is what you can do. You can go look at this resource, whether it's ConvertKit or a blog post somewhere or a YouTube video or whatever. And do it that way. And it just comes from this, because I'm not a salesman. I don't want to close right away. Right. I look for the long term and the sustainability. And while there are ebbs and flows in business, if it's organic and it's something that I play the long game for, it's always worked out for me. Right. And so that's how I look at it.
So let me ask you this. So when you're answering those questions on Twitter in that Twitter cocktail party, roughly, how long of a runway is it before somebody says, hey, maybe you can help me with my business? Like, how long were you answering those questions before you got your first gig, do you think?
That's a great question. It's usually, I want to say that I have that science down, but it really sometimes never pans out to anything, or it's quickly moved within the conversation that we've had. Where I've, solved their problem. They said, oh, but I'm also having this problem. And then, how about I just pay you? Right. Yeah. And so it doesn't have an exact science for me socially, but why I know it works is because even without me being there, people are tagging me, people are mentioning me. They're, in and amongst the community of Twitter or Facebook groups that I'm a part of or LinkedIn. I get a notice that somebody mentioned me to somebody else saying that I can help them. And so that's how I know that it works, because once somebody else starts talking or mentioning you, that's the word of mouth that I'm looking for, because then I'm referable because I've planted that flag.
So and this might be the what you've developed, but what social listening tool are you using to find out when people are talking about you? Is it your own proprietary thing that you developed, or is it like a Hootsuite or something?
Well, when I first started, it was a script that I ran from my own server, but now I use a tool called Zapier. Just linked into your Twitter account. You can do a search on Twitter. Whatever that search looks like. It's a lot easier nowadays than it was back in the day. But and then I just link in my Slack channel for my sales Slack channel, and then it pings me in Slack. So I get it on my phone, I get it on my desktop, wherever I got Slack installed, and I just jump into the conversation when I can.
Okay, that's awesome. So people, if they wanted to kind of replicate what you're doing on Twitter for their industry, they would just go to Zapier, set up an account there, and it's called setting up Zaps. I've never used Zapier. It's something that I really want to get into, but that's basically what they do to get that pinging started, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, you could do it yourself. I mean, if anybody's listening and they actually want the 1, 2, 3 steps on how to do this, I have a video. You could just opt into my newsletter right on my homepage there. Okay. I walk straight through it because it's been so helpful for me. It's the only sales tactic that I've used from the start to today that has remained, because it's useful. It saves me a boatload of time, and I'm not distracted by having to be on Twitter or LinkedIn or, as I said, I use this for Craigslist as well. And I've worked off of Craigslist for brands like PGA, Canon, Gander Mountain. A lot of people look down on Craigslist. And when I first started it, I would monitor Craigslist because there was job postings there that I could help those companies out. And what I wound up doing was noticing that I was late to the game. There was posts for major brands like Sony, Adobe. And what I found out of watching the behavior of these bigger brands was that they would post on Craigslist, and then as soon as they got an influx of applicants, they would pull their ad down. Right? I guess it was enough from the pool of applicants that they would just go ahead and decide, pick one. So similarly, I just set up that search to ping Craigslist, which allowed me to then be front of line again. And I landed clients like Gander Mountain, Canon, and PGA, and to be able to then work with these big brands with these quote unquote big logos and recognizable logos and things of that nature to help bolster my portfolio, if you will, and solve problems that, bigger brands had that I know I could solve. And so while people, they bash Craigslist, I hear it, right? And like, that's just nothing but garbage over there. Well, and again, those aren't the brands that I go after now. It's not my ideal client. If you notice your ideal client posting on a platform, learn about their behavior, learn about why they're posting, or maybe they are posting on these other platforms that you're just mocking at this point in time. And there's an opportunity for you to then go ahead and land grab and make a statement there. So it's just a similar method. I just try to learn where my clients exist in the marketplace and where they could potentially be. And I try to be there.
That's amazing. Like, who knew with Craigslist? Like, I haven't been on Craigslist in years. So now I gotta go check that out. That's awesome. Well, Jason, this was a really great conversation. Is there anything else you want to leave with us, or do you have anything for our listeners that they might benefit from today?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if any of this resonated with you, and like I said, it sounds like I have this all together, but I'm yet still figuring some of the stuff out. But if this resonated with you and you're trying to build a solo-based business and you're trying to figure out to quell the crowd, if you will, of, hey, you need to hire a team of 25 people, you can build it successfully on your own. It's just identifying that client, identifying your solution, and really trying to figure out how you can help them in the best way possible. I wrote a very long blog post basically on my formula.
Okay.
So if you want to head to that, that's probably the best place to go. And you can just see how I've unpacked it right on the back of my wife giving me the kick in the butt. That's essentially so you don't have to. Right. And that's where I come from. I come from a place of, if I encountered a hurdle and I got over that, and I can help somebody not encounter that hurdle the next go around, then that's the fuel to my fire. Awesome. So I'm going to link to that article in the show notes so you guys can all get access to that. Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks for having me. Hey there. I just want to say thank you for spending time with me here today. I know your time is super valuable, which is why I am dedicated to providing lots of usable, actionable information in the shortest amount of time possible. Before you go, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a future episode. And if you have ideas or topics you would like me to cover in an upcoming show, let me know about it in the comment section provided.